You're listening to the voice of Maui, community-supported radio, 88.5 FM, KAKU.
This is KAKU 88.5 FM.
I love you.
The voice of Maui.
Welcome to The Nature of Your Nature. Come home to You Know More with Dr. Valerie Simonsen on KAKU 88.5 FM, The Voice of Maui, broadcasting from Akaku Maui Community Media Center in downtown Kahului. Aloha. Welcome to The Nature of Your Nature. And boy, do we have an exciting guest here today, Jessica Brazil, who I actually met over on the front lines over on the west side during the fires. And as we were over there serving, there were thousands of people in the park, Konokowai Park, and I have an eye for keeping an eye on people that maybe are on the tipping point of trouble taking their life or something like that. But I was watching this one gentleman and couldn't communicate. I didn't speak their language. And then pretty soon, you, which I didn't know was you, were at the foot of the table I was at, and you were doing your hand pan. And pretty soon that gentleman came over and got closer and closer and closer. And what would you call that, Jessica, before I go into all this other stuff about what happened to him in that moment?
Well, thank you, Dr. Valerie, so much for having me here to share storytelling in such a meaningful way. And, you know, I was reflecting on your comment of first responder and what that really means. And I've been reflecting on it ever since. You know, what is it in us that's we're able to respond, whether that's in the first wave, the second wave, the third wave, or whatever wave it is that we are on in life. And so when I reflect on our first interaction with working with this gentleman, you know, for me, it was really a moment of feeling somebody had not landed in their body. And there was not any words that were going to really help this person land in their bodies. And so I just invited him to sit. In fact, he couldn't quite land enough to even really have body work done.
Right.
And so I just said, you know what, let's just sit and listen to this music. And I knew it was working because there was almost like little parts of his body that started to kind of like twitch, like he was coming back into his body, almost like he was had been having an outer body experience, which a lot of people do have when they're in trauma, because they just need to respond. They need to get somewhere. They need to stay alive. And sometimes it's hard to turn that nervous system response, like turn the volume down on it and come back into more of a parasympathetic nervous system state. So words are difficult to fully absorb when we're in an acute stress response. And that particular sound instrument I had used was sound healings. And I just got an intuition that day, just, you know, why don't you bring some sound instruments? You know, a lot of people just need to sit down and relax and kind of get into their bodies, and maybe somebody will benefit, or a few people will benefit. Maybe I'll do it over near where the body work tables are. And so this person had been invited into my presence to talk, and I just saw he wasn't capable of really communicating about much other, but had an unmet need. Yeah. And so by the time we had spent some time, you know, our nervous system after a while between bilateral movements or different trauma techniques, and then sometimes sound just helps kind of turn the volume down on that sympathetic nervous system response. And I just connected to his heart and my heart, and we have these neuroplasticity and mirroring effects that take place when we're in each other's presence, where we can just feel each other. And that dual attunement is what I like to, if I was going to give some language to help somebody understand what it was that you saw, it was attunement, and then coming into a flow of sound that helped him land. And from there, then he was able to actually receive professional, formalized mental health services after that. And I saw him a couple weeks later, and he really looked, he was almost unrecognizable.
Even the next day.
Yeah.
He met me as I walked over down the park. He met me eye to eye. he made eye contact and he said, what was that thing that she was touching? And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to make sure that you get connected and, So that heart-to-heart connection that you're talking about. Jessica, you've inspired me so much. I watch you just keep on reinventing yourself all the time. You adapt, you create something new. We would call you a universe sapien. It's like, okay, did that, now let me move on to the next thing, right? And you just have this brilliant mind. You were the founder of the Mindful Living Group.
Yeah.
For how many years have you done that?
We've been around about 13 years now, and we've been a group practice for, I think, about 8 or 9 years. And it's funny because when you say the word mindful, people always, misinterpret that word unless you have the Buddhist background and understand a little bit about that, what that word comes from. Because what it really is a practice of neutral acceptance from a compassionate lens, like an approach to life, and has some tools of cultivating the neutral mind, which is the part that's witnessing. So I like to say Mindful Living Group and my journey with mindfulness has been very much learning to get my mind out of the way and let these other parts of wisdom come shining through, like showing up for this talk and being like, I'm going to be open. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to talk about, and that's okay.
That's great.
And in fact, some of the best conversations or experiences like this gentleman that we came into contact with are, is letting the rational mind take a bit more of a backseat and our intuitive whole body, mind, spirit come forward and take a bit more of the lead.
Yeah. And your training is a licensed clinical social worker, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you have really come out with some pretty big words now as you're stepping into a new element in your life, which I think most of us are doing right now. It's the fires really pop something open and we're like, wait a minute, no, I want to really be who I am and not play all the games that we've been taught to play, perhaps, right? But you have the psychospiritual therapist, the rebirthing doula, leadership and life strategist consultant, and also doing podcasts called The Healer's Voices. Wow. When do you sleep?
I actually sleep a little bit more now than I did before. And that has been fascinating the more that I come into being more true to my entire self, is that I'm able to say no to some of the things that I've done in the past that really just were depleting for me. So while I may do a lot, I also rest, and some of the things that I do now feel restful because they're so deeply aligned in my truth, so it's not depleting. Mm-hmm. So yes, while I have a lot of things happening and a lot of different roles, these are titles that help people, come into maybe a pathway of an offering that I have agreed or I'm willing to show up with in life. And I think from the fires, I really learned that the way that I work is different than maybe the typical therapist. There are psychospiritual therapists, there are ministers, there are coaches, there are consultants out there. And the way that I offer myself has a couple different pathways, and it's just a little bit different, but also complementary to maybe what some other descriptions might be of another practitioner. And, one theme in my life I will just share is that I was born on winter solstice.
Oh, that's right.
And so one part that's really core to what I like to say my soul archetype design is that winter solstice is, the rebirth of the sun day. It's the darkest day of the year. After that, the days get brighter and longer. And that's always been, so when I talk about rebirthing doula, I've always been in this role for many, many years of helping initiate people into something deeper, really coming more into their life purpose, into really knowing themselves on a deeper layer rather than these prescribed roles and titles. And so when you talk about shape-shifting is really what I heard you describe is, yes, we can do that and we get to do that. And actually the more we practice being in the present moment and the more we embody ourselves and really live the truth of what we really know, which you always talk about, more, which I relate to, is we can change, and we're not the same person, or I'm not the same person I was before the fires. Those experiences changed me. So I couldn't go back to the same old identity. I think they changed me for the better. At least I feel more alive and in my essence and in my truth. And so I am inviting others that's supportive to them to step into that path. Hey, I've been on it really 13, 15, 20 years.
Right.
But it really took a whole new level after the fires, because working in that way, that was the only way that I knew how to be effective in that time. And it was effective. I found it was effective in helping a lot of people. And so I wanted to continue doing that. So what name was I going to give it? What title? What place?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you did your thing, and we hadn't met, but you did your thing, and I'm watching this whole thing happen, and I'm working on patients kind of above you, right, up on the table, and then I was walking over past this area, and you took my hand, and you said, "We'll be working together one day," and I looked at you and went, yeah, I think you're right, and then off onto something else, because we were so busy there for months, right? And I said, "You've got to meet this woman. You got to meet this woman that I saw doing this amazing things with this man." And you said, "That was me." You totally shape-shifted right there. I had no clue that's who you were. And then you went back to the professional as you were sitting at the table and doing whatever needed to be done as a professional. But I've watched you now. We've been together playing this game together for a couple years now, right? Hasn't it been a couple years?
Yeah.
Almost 2 years. Yeah. And you are part of our nonprofit, More, as a secretary, and also just the wisdom keeper of, here's another idea, and you know what? Here's some resources. Let's play with this. But you've really come into yourself. Like, there isn't the professional and the other. It is one now. That I think that's what most of us were getting to experience that over there. Even people that were the survivors of the fires. But those of us that were serving, from my experience, a lot of us have changed our way we're serving the world. Yeah?
Yeah, I have seen that with a lot of people. That they've really come into knowing their purpose or their gifts more fully, and able to show up in and being effective in how they offer themselves. And that's beautiful. What a gift, because we do all have a unique gift or contribution. And I like to say there's the collective consciousness or the subtle realms. There is so much information there. Jungian psychology is a great example of, all these archetypes that have always existed throughout cultures and time and space, that we all have these different archetypes within us. And when they all come together and are more whole, or we might need to come into practicing being a particular archetype for a little while. And there is so much information available when we go inside, and we more deeply go inside, instead of looking just outside for information or searching Google or ChatGPT.
Right.
I love to just go inside and ask myself the question and see what I'll discover before I search, and see how close it is.
That.
And
what a great idea.
Yeah, that's
Say
been a
that
practice.
again, because that's a really good tool people can use. You say that again?
Yeah, it's a great practice. In fact, I used to practice it with my niece and nephew when they were really young. I would invite them to look at a card or something, that's turned over, and just guess what the color was on the other side. Feel it and just use your imagination and guess. And just see how accurate it is. Start exercising our consciousness differently. How can our minds really be used to serve us instead of us, our minds guiding the journey. So the invitation for the tool is, before searching Google or ChatGPT or any of these other search engines that have wonderful information, I'm not saying abandon them. They're very helpful. Ask yourself inside first, the question, and then search. In fact, I did that earlier because you were asking about talking about the mind and how you define that. And I was like, okay, I was tempted to just look for a traditional definition.
Right.
And do that. And then I was like, well, I'm going to practice, looking inside and asking, what that means inside. What is my truth with? What does the mind mean? And I think I mentioned to you that, it's a connection to consciousness and awareness. And also our brain serves as a tool with that, which can be routed, and our nervous system sometimes can override that higher consciousness, I like to say. But we have different levels of consciousness in our mind. And it's one of those mysterious conversations, or mysterious aspects of our human experience that's continually changing. It's how we are able to assign identity that I know you as Dr. Valerie. I have a pattern recognition that has formulated this image that has helped me memorize you, as well as all of the experiences that have shaped our relationship journey. And then putting that in the context of a wider meaning in life. So yes, asking, the invitation is look inside, ask yourself the question first, and then go do the search and see how accurate it is. It's a great practice. And the more you do it, the more you'll improve in accuracy. It's a practice, just like meditation, just like our spatial awareness. Initially, like when our eyes are closed, we might feel a little wobbly. And the more that we, tune into, focusing in on my feet and feeling the ground beneath me. And just like in yoga, the body awareness increases, so does our mind awareness.
Yeah. You know more, right? And the nonprofit was started, and they are our sponsor for our show today, You Know More. It was started to support healthcare providers, first responders, educators, and community leaders. And it was started during COVID, as I had 5 peers take their own lives. And so as we have been working with our people through our organization, just the nonprofit, we've served almost 1,900 people since November, I think it is when we actually started doing restorative retreats and programs online as well as in person.
Yeah.
And I remember one that we did up in Kula, where you showed up with your bowls and just sat on the ground. And pretty soon, people were sitting on the ground around you and laying down on the ground around you, reconnecting with sound, but also the breath.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, there's certain sound frequencies that help calm the nervous system and help our breathing patterns change. Because sometimes we don't breathe fully deeply, and our nervous system gets interrupted. And I think we were talking about it earlier. The vagus nerve can get really disorganized in how it's just our breathing patterns are. So yeah, sound can be so helpful. Touch is so helpful. Laying on the ground is extremely helpful because there's that resonance in the earth that starts our heartbeat and our breathing pattern and our cadence to start coming into harmony with nature. And a lot of most of the fast-paced environment is hard on our nervous system. We're just not meant to be going fast-paced all the time. It makes us think that there's more to be afraid of than there actually is. Like our nervous system just thinks, I'm hurrying, therefore a stress response starts. Just that simple cadence. And the more that we move into that fast pace world, the more we need corrective experiences to slow down and be back into our natural rhythm and into the natural rhythm of nature, which is why I love to look towards indigenous cultures for wisdom and people that have a deep connection to nature, like naturopathic doctors and just people who are working with the land and have a really deep relationship with the land, because they're attuned.
Right.
Not everybody, of course, and some are, and they're really helpful to talk to and to get wisdom and information from about how to more quickly reorient ourselves into coming into our natural rhythm. And our nervous system can heal so quickly by doing that.
Yeah. And one of the trends that I'm seeing right now is with the fires, we saw this certain response. I'm going to call it PTSD, right? But there's other layers, but right now we're in a whole nother one, right? That there's all this political stuff going on and uncertainties and things like that. But it's giving us the opportunity to drop deeper.
It sure is.
Can you tell us a little more about that and what you have found to be really helpful for yourself and for others?
Yeah, I have repeatedly reminded myself of the mantra, the darker the shadow, the brighter the light. So the deeper we go, the more there is to retrieve. So when there's a lot of shadow, darkness, disturbance, and reminder, there's nothing certain in life. So when we're reaching for certainty, it's a great reminder to be less attached. So I go right back to my basic mindfulness tools of non-attachment. Almost everything in our life when we die is not going to be with us anymore. So it's a great practice of going a little deeper into the soil of our soul and saying, well, what do I really need right now? Like, what do I really need? Getting back to the basics. And that's not to say scarcity mindset, because that's also something that we get to work on as a collective and renegotiate with these other systems and entities, where we got to a breaking point as a collective and said, enough's enough. This poverty is not okay. Putting people deeper into poverty and scarcity, it's not helping anybody. It just creates more dis-ease, disruption, disturbance. So yes, as we go deeper into the soil of the soul, we also get to retrieve more of our original ancestral wisdom when we do that, the deeper we go inside. And I know in my own journey, that has awakened more deeply. So when you give me the reflections, I say, well, the more I got to go inward, the more deeply I connected to ancient wisdom that other circumstances hadn't fully inspired me to go that deep before.
I love that you're bringing up the ancestral, because I have a little bit of issue with that. Is this a big movement, ancestral healing? And that is valid. We do, that needs to be done. But pre-human, it was plants. They had a wisdom. And our DNA is 65% the same as a banana tree. We have that wisdom. They are our ancestors. And so that's the whole little jingle of the nature of your nature. Get back to nature, which is your nature.
Yeah.
Right?
It will remind us of everything we need to know right now.
Yes, it will.
Whether it's wisdom from a plant, wisdom from a 10th generation ago grandparent, or a celestial being, it will, whatever it is that we need will come up for us. I like to say, that the medicine is really, truly, deeply inside, and we cannot coexist without harmony with nature and our community. So, yes, we are actually all relatives, every living organism.
Yeah.
Every human, every species, both human and non-human form, we are relatives in some way. So the sooner we see that we are truly one, in a sense, then the sooner we will come into less internal disruption.
Yeah, which brings me back down to this plant, there was one of this red ginger that wanted to come, is one, and it's a system, right? There's all these different layers to it. And when we talk about community, that we have our community, and we're in a community right now with Akaku. Thank you, Akaku, and KAKU FM 88.5. That's amazing that we're here talking about this today. Thank you, Jessica. But also the community in our body.
Yeah.
Because medicine has compartmentalized it all. You go to a cardiologist, and you go to a podiatrist, and you go to a gastroenterologist or whatever. And then the one thing that I think is probably the most neglected is the brain, the mental, right? because there's that stigma. But they all are, it's a community. We live in our bodies are a community. And when COVID was breaking out, I talked to one of my peers and I said, if a tree is sick, you fix the soil. And that doctor said, Valerie, do you really think we're that enlightened? And I said, we better get that enlightened. We need to come back to the soil of our soul.
Yes, we sure do. And first of all, remember we have a soul. So as we get more and more artificial information influencing us, we really need to be able to tell and have a relationship with our soul, and really notice, like, what is the current inside telling us? What are the rivers inside of our bodies, the highways? What are they telling us? Because yes, we have an enormous amount of medicine just naturally stored inside of our bodies that will tell us exactly what we need to get well. We are wired to heal.
We are. This body wants to.
Yeah.
And the mind, our mental, the brain is brilliant. The mind is brilliant. We're going to play with that a little bit more, but I want to bring it back to, I was at EMT for 15 years. You know, CPR is airway, bleeding, and circulation, right? So you got to make sure there's breath.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So you want to play with that a little bit? Breath, awareness, breath, connection, communication.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I really like to do just to arrive in my body is actually just to start breathing from my feet, from the bottoms of my feet and the tips of my fingertips, and just connect to the earth below me. And just start drawing that breath really slowly from the bottom of my feet, up my legs, up my belly, and really expand my belly on the inhalation, bring it all the way through my heart and all the way up through my head. And really take up space, right? And then exhale, and let that breath really release and move all the way back down. And then just connect to the elements in my environment for support. If I feel like I need more flow, I may ask for some more of the support from the air and the water elements. If I need more grounding, I may ask, the earth to help me feel more supported. And the fire, if I'm having a lot of fatigue, I may say breath of fire might help with that, which is, I think probably for many fire survivors, though, there's been plenty of that fire, so a lot of cooling breath and long, slow, deep breathing may be more helpful. Let yourself rest. Don't try to force yourself back to life in that vigorous exertion way. We need restorative time. And then for those who maybe, have a pattern of stagnation, that breath of fire can be really helpful, which is a powerful breathing from the belly that starts lighting up the flame. I like to say it's kind of like... Well, I'll just share a little bit. Is this on video too?
Sure.
Okay. So then if somebody wants breath of fire, it's like a dog panting, but the mouth is closed and it's a strong contraction in the belly. So there's just a real strong belly in and out pumping. So, as I look at this beautiful flower that you offered, it really reminds me of the spinal cord as I look at it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the building blocks that there's... It doesn't flower from the bottom. This particular one, it's flowering from the top. But it has to have the soil and the water and the nourishment from its roots in order to be capable of flowering. And we just can't rush the process. Everything has its own timing. So in our own journey of healing, and our own journey of coming into, say, flowered consciousness, our minds may be working more efficiently for us, our bodies working more efficiently for us. Like you said, start with the soil. Start with the nourishment of what water, soil, food we're putting in our bodies. Right. And, our minds, we get really stuck on the rational thought. Invite in the mystery a bit more. There's some really good science on that too. What we believe about something has a predictive effect.
I love the word that you use there, mystery.
Yeah.
Can you play a little bit with that?
Yeah, just, playing with maybe that childlike wonder and curiosity The older I get, the more that I embrace and practice curiosity. It's less prescriptive. And there's even some research around our beliefs about dis-ease, like a condition, right? And it actually materializing. There's a big connection to that. So
Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief. I remember when first time he wrote his book, and science was not liking that, but now it's all validated and it's there. But when you were talking about the mystery, I remember the day I finally did get over to the west side. It was a few days before I got in there, and I was talking to a friend, because we did have phone for a few minutes anyway, and I said, I think I'm grieving. And then I went, no, I'm in awe. I'm in awe. It was like an orchestra.
it really was. Yeah. Everybody just knew what to do.
They just knew what to do.
All the healers and responders, they knew what to do. And I just have to give a little shout out to the midwives. Because,
oh my gosh.
Wow, I really had no idea how big of a force they are as first responders.
Oh my gosh.
And effective. And they were like this invisible group that all of a sudden had an enormous impact. And of course there was many incredible first responders.
What?
They just are coming to mind in this moment.
Yeah, Pacific Birth Collective, right? That set up that whole area over there in Honokowai Park, and they were amazing.
Incredible. Yeah, and Maui medics. You know, they were
Maui
a lot
medics,
of traditional and non-traditional healers too. First responders, nurses, doctors, mental health. But this is how we came together, right? As a community, but everybody just showed up and they knew what to do. So when we go into the mystery, which we were practicing from in a way, right?
Sure.
We were saying, I'm going to show up and see what shows up. So it's a beautiful practice in life. Mm-hmm. And make sure, I guess this is a little invitation to the listeners, if it lands and resonates for you, make sure to leave space in your calendar for the mystery. If everything is scheduled, we get lost in predictability and time. And when we have time to just be in the mystery, say, hey, maybe it's Saturday mornings, maybe it's Thursday afternoons, unscheduled time to be in the mystery. You can still be with your families. You can still have intentions for 30 things being done during that time. Then let it all go and just see what shows up and in what order.
Yeah. And bringing in the mystery, or making space for the mystery, right? But also we talked a little bit earlier about put yourself in your day timer, right?
Your self-care, yes. Yeah. Your first appointment. Every day we need to have an appointment with ourselves. Whether it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, hopefully more than that. But start somewhere. Because if we don't put the oxygen mask on ourselves, we're just not that effective with others. In fact, we become less and less effective, and more of our relationships suffer, and our health suffers, and our projects and our income. And it's not easy. I mean, I know after the fires, I had given to a place of utter exhaustion. I had nothing left. I really thought my heart was going to stop. I was so tired. And I know that there's plenty of people that can relate to that. Yes. And I got to a point where I had to unplug and just start taking, long weekends and say, I'm offline, I'm unavailable. Mm-hmm. I've got to find ways to recharge. And I just would lay on the ground sometimes, on the earth, and just find my way back home. And yes, schedule the time now so it doesn't schedule itself for you.
Right.
That's an invitation, not a command.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. It's an opportunity.
Yeah.
And the possibilities are well, we don't even need to go there because it's just possibilities.
Yeah.
When we stop, and I saw that up in Kula when we did that retreat.
Yeah.
They laid on the ground and they watched the clouds. Now, I had that in the agenda.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out that way. But once they got on the ground and you were doing the bowls, and they'd had really good organic food in their belly and had some little bit of body work, wow, they saw the clouds, right? And they connected with themselves And I remember there was this eclipse, a solar eclipse. And I was on a boat with a couple friends, and I had invited you, and you said, no, I'm just going to go, and I'm just going to be on my board. Do you remember that day?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, man, I wish I'd have done that. When we get together in groups, sometimes it's ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, you know, and I'm guilty of that myself, processing through my words.
Yeah.
But I remember talking to you the next day or getting something from you, and you said, I could feel it. I was not that far from you down in the Kihei area, but I can feel your connection that you achieved by just being there on your board out there in the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah. And tolerating that alone time, you know, getting what is one of the recommendations is let yourself get bored and then go beyond that, because after the boredom, something else starts to come through. That's when we really start accessing the mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our intuition starts lighting up. It's actually natural when the right and left hemisphere of our brain and our nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, are functioning in harmony with one another, and we are well nourished and free from major illness. Everything just starts coming. It's not like you have to try. You don't have to look. It just starts happening. So that's the amazing thing.
And once you have a taste of that, you'll want more.
Oh, yeah.
Like yesterday, I picked up my little art book that I have. I prefer to use art rather than words.
Yeah.
And I just went, that's all I want to do today. I just want to create.
Yeah.
Right?
I just look forward to that alone time in nature so much. Or in my little cocoon spaces at home, my porch, indoor, outdoor, listening to the birds and, you know, finding that listening deeper. That sometimes you can hear the wings flap and it feels like a little blessing, you know, like being in a ceremony where somebody gives you the little feather blessing. That was one of my experiences this morning. Beautiful. And that was, you know, an attunement that happened with my hearing over time of like starting to connect more deeply with nature to where that feels a little closer, that feels a little more accessible. And then the heart just starts to open wider. When our heart is open wider, then our consciousness expands.
So from a scientific point, you know, you're talking about your vagal nerve there, right? And I can remember coming out where, right? I couldn't keep my eyes focused on anything. It was just fight and flight all the time. And what I'm hearing you saying about the birds this morning, that vagal nerve was calm.
Yeah.
It was connected, and you were aware on every level of your senses, hearing, sound, right?
Yeah.
Smell,
Sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. Yeah.
All your senses.
And if our vagus nerve and our nervous system is not well regulated, then walking, bilateral movement is so good for it. EMDR, eye movements, the ART, eye movement treatments, yoga, you know, don't try to force yourself to do a stillness, because that can be really frustrating with an acute stress response.
Yeah.
Or to do a deep meditation. It's just not very accessible at that stage. But moving meditations, gentler ones that gradually slow down the cadence, getting in the ocean and letting yourself feel the rocking of the waves, just like a baby being rocked to sleep. That helps the nervous system remember, oh yeah, this is what it feels like to be safe. But when it wants to move, because it's still remembering so deeply the need to move to survive.
And I'm really honoring the word you use, safe.
Yeah.
Let's play with that a little bit. Because in the world where things are pretty unpredictable, not that they ever were predictable, how do we find that safe space? And then how do we know when it's not, and how do we know when it is?
That is such a great conversation, and I would love to take a deep dive into that. And it's unique because when we don't feel safe, we want to first look into what is it that doesn't feel safe in my body. That's usually where I start.
Right.
Where is it stored? And is it real right now? Right now.
Mm.
If it's real right now, we need to take action, right? To keep ourselves safe.
Right.
We don't have step one, removal of self from whatever that unsafe situation is immediately. And sometimes that's just looking for a safe person and getting their attention. And then you kind of anchor in, and that can diffuse some of what the situation is, because now you have an ally that can navigate with you. Even if it's just a quick eye gaze moment. I think there's some research around that with women, finding, another women in specific settings.
I've seen that.
Yeah, that once you just make that eye gaze. And if there's not an immediate safety issue, and maybe you're planning ahead that there may be some unsafe issues. I was just talking with a dear transgendered colleague, friend, that was anticipating travel to a place that is very violent towards transgendered persons. And so we really had to plan some safe places to stop. Violence is never okay. We need to love everybody, no matter what.
Yeah.
I think that's one of Ram Dass's statements, right? Love everyone and tell the truth.
Yeah.
And there's many other beautiful, I think Jesus had some beautiful teachings around that. Many wise teachers, right? The spiritual teachers. And I'm sure we have so many models in many different religions, spiritual teachings, psychology. This is why I refer to myself as a psychospiritual therapist as well, because the spiritual teachings can give us some guidance, right? Something a little bigger than ourselves to move towards. And so if we're looking at safety, what is something we can look towards that can offer more safety? And if we're not sure, then we can find somebody that is a little bit more sure that can help us navigate.
You've certainly been that for me. Yeah. I've worked with you and doing the ART, and it was much more than that, but it's a tool that I have now that even if I'm having a bad dream, I can move my eyes and shift that whole dream world.
Yeah. And speaking of, we're going to actually have a Dreams and Symbols workshop series that is free for fire survivors and helpers. Great. So please come if you'd like to, because, we can do so much healing in our sleep.
Oh, yeah.
I used to do some guided meditations or yoga nidra, or listen to different mantras or guided hypnosis before going to sleep. And sometimes I still do, before I could access a meditation practice. And that helps get the mind prepared to be able to move into conscious states of practice. And our dreams are such incredible hidden, information that can be so valuable.
Right.
And yeah, doing something like that that's stored deeper in your subconscious was like, oh yeah, eye movement in my sleep that can change the story or the nervous system interpretation of the story that's playing out. Because one of my teachers actually said, the subconscious is, our dream state sometimes is like having a bowel movement of the mind.
Oh, wow. That's
it's
great.
Trying to discard a lot of information, or it's trying to get our attention because we're not giving something enough of our attention in our waking state. So we get to sift through that and say, okay, well, what's like these hidden messages, and what is something that's just purging?
Right.
And so, yeah, our dream space is a beautiful place to explore.
This morning I had a dream about centipedes.
Ooh.
Silver centipedes.
Ooh.
And there wasn't a fear. And they were actually, in my truck. And there was that part of my psyche that was like, oh, we've got to be scared of this. But I wasn't. And the centipede metaphysically it's a very powerful entity, right?
Yeah.
And a sign of good fortune and strength and creativity, all of those things. But when you were talking about the dream work that you're putting together, and when you say fire survivors, does that mean that they needed to be in the fire, or? No,
this is helpers or anybody impacted directly or indirectly from the fires.
Okay, great.
So honestly, if somebody is from Maui, lived on Maui through the fires and had any kind of ripple effect in their lives, which most of us did, then is it highly likely that you're eligible. Now, we want to engage in reciprocity because, the funding that we received is not a large, substantial amount to cover for that. So, for those that are able to, we invite them to pay so that the instructor can be compensated fairly. And then for those who need to receive, shamelessly guilt-free receive, please receive.
Right.
We are happy to give. We are
And how
so
do
happy
they
to give.
find that information about that? And then the other thing that you have is 101 daily inspirational tips. How do they tell us more about that, and how do they get a hold of that information?
Yeah, so a few things are on our website, mindfullivinggroup.org. Events has the event workshop. And then on the homepage, you'll see a button on mindfullivinggroup.org that says Get Daily Inspirations. And that signs somebody up that if you're on a device a lot or on email, I invite people to sign up if it's helpful for them because you get daily mindfulness tips for 100 days.
Wow.
So it's called 100 Mindful Days, getting daily inspirations. It's not a big, long one, but it's great if you have no idea or you want to expand your practice in some way, how to look at something each day mindfully and just incorporate that into your life. It's a great tool to reduce suffering and struggle in the mind, to just practice that moment of acceptance, compassion, and however we're looking at. So it gives like some wisdom and some tips for that particular topic of the day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love the word compassion.
Yeah.
And first of all, compassion for ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
And
everything starts there.
Yeah.
Ripples out from there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we also have a podcast, Healers Voices, that has some really lovely conversations that if somebody's just wanting to explore different traditional, non-traditional ways of healing or different topics of interest, we have some great shows on there to listen to if that's inspiring as well.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. There's so many resources available. The most valuable is the one that's inside.
Absolutely.
Right? But it always is helpful. I know when I worked with you, because of the stress that I was dealing with physically, emotionally, and spiritually, I needed a guide. I needed help.
Yeah.
And I'm here to say that let's stop the stigma with that the mind or that mental health is separate from, your pancreas. It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, we respect diabetes.
Yeah.
Well, let's respect everything else.
Absolutely.
And I'm not here to say diagnoses are good, but there's something to that group trauma, right?
Yeah.
As well as global trauma and group and global resiliency and healing.
Yeah. Yeah. Connecting to both our individual and collective relationship. And yeah, thank you for sharing your own journey. I knew that I needed to reach out for help too, to just make sure that my judgment was not impaired.
Right.
Number one, especially as healthcare, in healthcare roles or in roles of helping other people, we all need to have different anchors in our lives at different times, whether it's a guide, a therapist, a mentor. And I guess that's why I decided to reorient how I'm offering myself, because I ended up working with a lot of leaders and people that I had to totally reinvent their businesses or their professions or their spiritual belief systems or moral injury just was, so deep.
Oh my gosh.
That some of these typical ways of approaching were not effective. And so other approaches were more effective.
And your new website is
JessicaBrazil.com. Yeah,
Thank you.
That's where I offer the spiritual mentorship and leadership and business consulting, and as well as assisting in some projects, community projects, where I offer some of that consulting capacity, as well as some separate offerings like retreats, projects that I may be involved in, or somatic breathwork journeys where people can take a deeper dive of landing inside.
And when we land inside to the nature of our nature, it's amazing what we're capable of, isn't it?
Absolutely. Isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really seeing it right now because I'm dealing a lot with cancer. People are dealing with cancers, especially since the fires.
Yeah.
And when they pull the whole team together, mind, body, spirit, they're doing amazing things. And the other day, the doctor's like, there's no way that level went from 25,000 down to 210. There's no way that lab test could be correct. But it is a way.
Well, I like to always remember that there has been some documented cases where somebody with dissociative identity disorder, right, they embodying different personalities, can take on different diseases.
Yeah.
And the lab and testing results sometimes will show that. And then in the different personalities embodied are different. And so when we talk about the belief, because they really believe they're that person in that moment and
Yes.
their body and manifest that disease. So when we talk about shapeshifting, it's a great reminder we can shapeshift our beliefs that can heal dis-ease. But we can't lie to ourselves because that creates dis-ease. So we have to first look at what's happening in our body and be real with it.
Yeah.
And then tell it. We can re-story it, though, and we can re-map it.
Yeah.
And we can re-pattern it.
Yeah.
And we can remember differently.
And remember means bringing the members back, because we've all had some kind of fracturing in our life from trauma or whatever. And we get to rebuild.
Yeah.
We rebuild ourselves, and then as we do it in a good way, everyone benefits.
Yeah.
And what does doing it in a good way means? Kindness, compassion. And I like the concept in Taoism, lay low like water. Be like water. Water always finds its way. Never goes uphill. It always finds a way.
We are all walking each other home, aren't we?
Yeah, Ram Dass wrote that one, didn't he?
Apparently
Yeah.
Ram Dass wanted to show up today.
Yeah, I guess so. Hey, Ram Dass. Yeah. Yeah. Was there
Yeah.
anything else that you'd like to share? We got a couple minutes left.
Really, I just want to invite any listeners that this lands with is that your own story, your own journey, however you come into arriving fully in you right now is perfect, perfectly imperfect. And if there's dis-ease, disruption, discomfort, just welcome all the parts. When they're all included and they all get loving attention, that's when things start to really heal.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And I like the remembering part and using repurposing.
Yeah.
So I remember when I worked with lack and I gave it a new job description, and I was going to let it, because lack was powerful. And it kept me on a certain road, right? So I gave it the job of being my GPS, and its name became Lucky. So actually, in my truck, you'll see I have a lucky sign to remind me of what my GPS is, because fear, sadness, all these emotions, whatever it is, are powerful.
Yeah.
Let's embrace that, repurpose it, give it a new job description, and then move forward in our life with what we want to do. And then, as I said, you're one of the universe sapiens in the planet. You'll get it, and then you'll move on to something else.
Yeah.
Right? We just keep evolving.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We get to reimagine over and over again until we've created the life that we know we're meant for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And wherever that's at, if it's reimagining safety, that's one I've actually been practicing lately as well.
Yeah, for 2 years
Because
here.
there's been so much opportunity to practice that.
Yeah.
So I say, okay, well, we get to keep practicing, reimagining. What do I really need to be safe? What am I afraid of? What is real? What is not real? And then we get to reimagine how that, just like you did with lack and lucky, who that part really, because it's just a part, right?
Yeah.
It's a very helpful part. And sometimes become a pretty dominant ego part.
Oh, yeah.
But we don't want to be mean to that one or exclude it, because it's really helped us somewhere along the way. We need to give it our love and our attention and hold it and give it a really important job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jessica, thank you for joining us today on this journey of returning to the nature of your nature. Come home to You Know More. We want to thank You Know More, the nonprofit, for sponsoring us here today, and also Akaku and the radio KAKU 88.5 FM. I'm trying to sound kind of like, I don't know, somebody knows what they're doing here, but I stumble over my tongue every time I say it. But thank you so much for everything that you've done for the world and continue to do. You're quite an inspiration in my life, and I know you've touched hundreds of thousands of people globally and will continue to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Valerie, so much for having me here and for being such an inspiration and beacon of hope, and for just inviting me into You Know More, to this show, into this talk. And yeah, I'd like to say it takes a village, and we're only stronger together. Yeah. And however I've touched anybody, it's because somebody else has touched me too. So thank you to everybody who's contributed along the way, including you.
Great.
Thank you. And our incredible community, because we have such an amazing community.
We do. And next week we'll have Lisa Carey with Somatics.
All right.
On our show, The Nature of Our Nature. So welcome home, everyone, to the nature of your nature. And thank you again, Jessica and Akaku. And we are out.
The County of Maui Department of Parks and Recreation is now accepting seasonal employees